Hey, how's it going? Today I'm talking about the Finisher Framework, Part 5, Stretching and Mobility.
This is Running to the Castle, a podcast for injury-prone RunDisney runners on a journey to running magical miles. Join me, Dr. Allie, as I share the secrets I've gathered as a runner, doctor of physical therapy, and coach. You'll learn the exact ways I get my clients to the castle strong without feeling broken or held together with KT tape as they cross the finish line.
So I've been talking about the Finisher Framework, and if you're new to this podcast, go back and start from the beginning. A couple episodes ago, the Finisher Framework Part 1, that gives a general overview, and listen about strength, training, rest and recovery, and then today is stretching and mobility. So it's a whole series talking about each individual part of the Finisher Framework so that you can cross the finish line without feeling broken. So stretching and mobility. Let's first talk about what that even means. Aren't they the same thing? That's a question I get often. Aren't stretching and mobility the same thing? So no, they are not. Stretching, when somebody says stretch, they typically mean static stretching. What that means is you are holding a position for 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 60 seconds. I don't know if people are holding it longer, but maybe specific stretching classes are. That would be what I mean when I say stretching. Mobility work is similar to stretching in that you could be doing the same movement, the same position, but you're not holding it for any length of time. You're going into the position, you're coming out of the position. So as an example, a hamstring stretch, I could do a hamstring stretch where I am sitting on the ground, one leg out to the side, and I lean over and I go into the stretch. Then I can hold that for 15 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, whatever I'm holding it for. That would be a hamstring stretch. In the rehab world, I also use mobility. So somebody who can't hold that position for any length of time, but we need to work toward being able to hold that position. They could be doing a hamstring mobility where they lean towards their foot to get some stretch, but they come immediately out of it. They don't hold it for even 5 seconds. They're in and they're out. That would be mobility. In this episode, I'm not talking about dynamic stretching. I will briefly tell you that that is something that could be done before a run, before a workout, where you're actively doing some hip opening movements, some butt kicks, some high knees, something like that. Those are considered dynamic stretches. Those could be used before a workout. I'm not talking about that because this aspect of the Finisher Framework is for recovery. And this would be for afterward, after your workout, immediately after or days after the workout. So that would be stretching, maybe some mobility. If you're rehabbing, maybe just strictly mobility. So what do these do? So stretching, static stretching can elongate your muscles. It can make you more flexible and it can prevent soreness. So when we have a really hard workout or a really long workout, even if its intensity isn't that hard, but we've been out there for a long time, stretching and holding static stretches can help reduce the soreness later that day and the next day. So it prevents you from feeling really terrible and feeling like you can't move around. So that's why I recommend stretching after any kind of workout. Mobility can do the same thing. The difference would be that mobility, again, like I said, you're not holding that static stretch. So I use mobility for somebody who is really sore, in a lot of pain, or isn't flexible enough to get into the position to hold for any length of time. So I mentioned the hamstring stretch versus hamstring mobility. You can do the same thing with a quad stretch or a hip flexor stretch. You can do a quad mobility or a hip flexor mobility, where you want to stretch those out, but you can't. You either can't get into the whole position or you can't hold that position once you're there. That's when just easing into the position and easing out of it would come into play. So who should be doing stretching and mobility? All runners. All runners should be doing stretching and mobility to a degree. The amount and how long you're holding the stretches or doing the mobility will change based on your experience, how flexible you are, any injuries that you're rehabbing. all of those combined will dictate how and what you do. Somebody who shouldn't be stretching, somebody who has a tendon injury. So if you have a tendinopathy, a runner's injury, you don't want to overly stretch. So I actually shouldn't say that you don't want to stretch at all. You want to be cautious with your stretching. I think there's a time and a place with stretching and mobility for all sorts of injuries. But one mistake that I find that runners who have Achilles tendinopathy, as an example, is they feel, oh, my Achilles really hurts. It feels better when I stretch. I'm going to stretch the heck out of it and make it feel better long term. And then they stretch the heck out of it. It feels pretty good while they're doing it and for a little while, a short time after, and then they get rebound pain and rebound tightness where usually 24 hours later or the next day rather, like after a sleep, it feels tighter and it feels worse. And what ends up happening is somebody says, "Oh, well, I felt so good with the Achilles stretch yesterday. I hurt today. I'm going to stretch more. That feels good. I'm doing something that's helpful and it helps. It feels good for a little while, seemingly helps for a little while. And then the next day, it's worse again." And that is a pattern that happens when you have a tendinopathy. So Achilles tendonitis or tendinopathy is a situation that would happen. Runner's knee is another situation that would happen where you overdo it and you think it's helping, but it's actually making you worse. So somebody who has a tendon issue, you want to be very cautious about stretching. And since we're talking about stretching and overstretching, should you be stretching hard? No. Stretching should not be significantly painful. It may not be super comfortable. Imagine you've never stretched before and you go to touch your toes. You're standing up, you bend over and touch your toes. You feel the tension. You feel how tight your muscles feel. It's not super comfortable, but it shouldn't be painful. It also should not make your toes tingle. It should not make your toes go numb. I'm talking about this particular stretch. In other stretches, you also shouldn't be making something tingle or go numb either. Those situations mean that you are affecting the nerves. So, in particular, the hamstring stretch, I've had clients and patients in the past where they're like, oh, yeah, this hamstring stretch feels so good. When I do it long enough, my toes go numb and I know it's really working. And I'm like, whoa, back it up, back off, because your nerve is not your hamstring. It is your nerve. It's your sciatic nerve, to be precise. And it goes from your hip all the way down to your toes. And depending on which branches you are overly stretching, you are going to feel it either in the whole foot, part of the foot, bottom of the foot, certain toes, things like that. You don't want to feel that hamstring stretch down into your foot. You also don't want to feel that hamstring stretch in your calf. Okay? So this is another mistake that I see runners make is they will do a hamstring stretch and they're like, "Oh God, my hamstring stretch feels so much better when I pull my toes towards my nose." So if instead of using a nylon rope under the arch of my foot, I move it up to the toes so that I can really flex that foot. This is what clients will tell me and I say, "No, please don't do that because when you stretch, the muscle that you're stretching is only affected by changing the position of the joint that the muscle crosses." Okay, I know that was a lot of words. Your hamstring, as an example, attaches from your butt just past your knee at the top of your shin bone, like the back side of it, okay? It's not crossing your ankle. So you moving at your ankle should have no effect on your hamstring. Okay? So if that so-called hamstring stretch where you really flex those toes hard makes you feel a stronger stretch and makes you feel like you're doing more, you are now stretching your sciatic nerve. Not necessarily a bad thing, but there's not much benefit. Okay? Because nerve fibers, they don't stretch. They're not elastic fibers. You can release a nerve doing certain types of movements, but stretching is not one of those movements. So if you are stretching your hamstring, you feel a harder stretch, more of a stretch, especially in your calf by pulling your toes towards your nose, you are now affecting your sciatic nerve. I don't want you to do that. If my clients tell me that they feel that, I will say, okay, back off, relax your toes, let your foot act like it's hitting the gas pedal as opposed to flexing it up. Keep it relaxed because you don't want that nervy pain. You don't know if you have an inflamed nerve or an inflamed sheath around that nerve and you are overly stretching it, well, that's going to create inflammation and pain. So now we could be causing another problem. We don't want to do that. We just want to stretch. So more isn't better, harder isn't better. You want to feel the stretch. You want to feel like you're doing something, but it should not be overly exaggerated when you come out of that position. You should not be like, oh, yep, ooh, yeah, now I'm getting back into my normal position. You shouldn't have that reaction. It shouldn't feel like you are now putting effort in to just get back to your normal position. You either stretched too far or you held it too long. That's why I recommend anybody who's new to stretching, they stretch in 10-second or 15-second increments. And your total stretching time should be a minute. So if you're doing 15-second increments, that means you're doing 4 repetitions on each side. If you're doing 30-second increments, you are stretching twice on each side. If you're doing 60-second increments, you're just stretching once. You could also do 20-second increments where you are stretching 3 times on each side. But for somebody who's new, who's never done it before, maybe start with the mobility or just start with the 10 to 15 seconds. That is usually tolerable for somebody, doing 15 seconds. And you should set a timer. Set that timer if you're new to stretching so you know how long you're actually holding it for. Because 30 seconds in a stretch can feel like forever, especially if you're new to it. And you want to know if you don't feel good with the stretch afterward, either later in the day or the next day, you want to know, was it the stretch or was it how long I held it for? So if you're going to make that distinction, you need to figure out how long you held it for. And if you hold it for 30 seconds, this is just an example. If you hold it for 30 seconds, you don't feel great the next day. You have rebound tightness, rebound soreness, where you feel tighter and worse after. Well, go drop it down to 15 seconds. Does that have the same effect? If it does, well, you could be stretching wrong or you could be stretching too far. And we don't want to change too many variables at once because we need to know what is going on. We change one thing at a time. So that's stretching hard or how long. You don't need to stay in the stretch for hours and hours and hours, minutes and minutes and minutes. 15, 20, 30, 60-second increments, whatever you're doing, make sure the total length of time you hold it for is 60 seconds. So if you do 60 seconds, you hold it for 1 repetition. If you do 30 seconds, you do 2, and so on and so forth. And then when should you be using mobility versus stretching? So I said it a little bit in the beginning. Mobility is really good when you want to stretch or need to stretch something, but you can't hold it for the same length of time. So what if you do a hamstring stretch as an example, and it doesn't feel great the next day? You get rebound tightness, rebound soreness, and you only held it for 15 seconds. You didn't push too hard, but it was still too much. Well, now you might try a hamstring mobility where you just get into the position and you come out of it, and you get into the position and you get out of it to make it more tolerable until you can hold it for the 15 seconds. Now, I'd say that's pretty rare. Most people can hold it for at least the 15 seconds for a gentle stretch, but sometimes that doesn't happen. So that would be when you would want to use mobility. Or if you're really, really sore, let's say you did a 15-mile long run because you're gearing up for dopey and today was a 15-mile long run and your legs are spent, but you know you need to stretch so that they don't feel worse tomorrow. Well, you might start getting into the stretching position and feel like, oh God, I cannot hold this for 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, even if you normally could. So instead of holding it, because you know instantly when you're starting it, you're like, oh, this doesn't feel normal. This doesn't feel like it typically does. Then you just move in and out of the position. And you can do the mobility first to loosen things up. and then hold it. So sometimes for my hip flexor stretching, I won't feel great. My hips will feel really tight. So I'll do a couple of mobilities, move in and out of the hip flexor positioning before I hold the stretch. And that's one way that you could use that as well. So mobility and stretching, super important part of the support section of the finisher framework. This is what will help support your training so that you can keep training without interruption. You can make it so that you're not sore the next day, not sore the day after that, and keep training regularly so that you don't fall behind, you don't lose consistency or motivation. Remember, we want to make sure that our supporting side is comparable to whatever we've done on our build side. So if we had a super long run, we are going to want to stretch and recover longer. If it's a shorter run, we still want to stretch and recover, but it might not be as long as when we do it for a long run. So things like if you're starting out and you're doing a 5K this week and that's not a super long run for you, compared to a 15-mile long run, a 20-mile long run, the amount of stretching and recovery you do for that 5K should be complementary to how long that 5K was. So it's shorter than a 15-mile race. So we're stretching and recovering after that 5K, but maybe it's 10 minutes. 15-miler, 20-miler might be closer to 30 minutes because it should be comparable, commensurate with the amount of activity you did. Okay, that's all I have for you today. Please take what you've learned in this episode and use it to adjust your strategy for your Run Disney race training. The finisher framework isn't just a checklist. It's a smarter way to train so you finish strong, not broken. And if you want personalized guidance specific to your race, your injury history, your running background, and your goals, that's exactly what we do inside Stronger, Faster Finisher. You'll get step-by-step instructions and a proven system to help you train smarter from start to finish. Join the waitlist today to be the first to know when it opens next. Hey, can I ask a quick favor? If you're enjoying this podcast, would you take 20 seconds to leave a rating and review? Leaving a rating and a review helps other runners find this podcast because the platform you're listening to this on will start suggesting it to runners like you. All it takes is 20 seconds. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast. As always, thanks so much for listening. That's all for now. Talk to you soon.